Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. We are beginning this week with a moon in Pisces, and this, Pisces um, energy is a mutable energy, but I wouldn't say that mutable energy is at all the focus of the week. It's almost like mutable energy prepares us for something. Um, in the same way, it's not insignificant, right? We know from a seasonal perspective, um, that Pisces is the season just before spring. We get prepared for the initiation of Aries, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And then Gemini is the season just before Cancer, and we get prepared for the season of summer to arrive. And likewise, Virgo is the season that is just before Libra. And that is where we are right now. We have the sun in Libra, making it square to Mars. Libra is an initiation of sort of a harvest time, fall. And each of these cardinal seasons then are followed by fixed seasons. So, if you look at your natal chart, you can kind of take a look and see what are the predominant energies of the planets that I have. Is there a lot of mutable planets? Is my soul here very much changing or preparing for something? Is there a lot of cardinal energy, right? Am I here initiating something at the start of something? And maybe you're one of those souls that comes here with a lot of fixed energy. I'm here to really deeply work something out. And many of us probably have some combination of these energies at play because on some level we come here with, you know, things that are just easy for us to work out, easy for us to evolve. Um, and other things, especially family dynamics, relationship dynamics, places where we feel hurt and wounded, places where we have suppressed the deeper nature of our own being, where those are very particular initiations. And likewise, there are times in our life where we are undergoing those initiations because that is what we have to do, right? I really like this phrase, evolutionary necessity. It came up a lot during the EA online conference. And when I've been meditating on that, you know, it's helpful for me because in my life, I had a lot of early childhood trauma, a lot of experiences that I would say most souls don't have to undergo or wade through the kind of darkness that I've had to encounter in my own life. But I definitely can say that it's initiated me in so many ways. And I've been studying this in this book study, and one of the things that when I was reading this morning during my meditation, one of the things that he said is like, if all the things that you're doing, if all the things that you're learning, if all the ways that you're, accumulating knowledge, working things out, doesn't ultimately lead you to being a more loving person, then what's the point? And I do think that is the gift of the initiation. That's the gift of the preparation of any initiation as well. The preparation for initiation is just as important as the initiation itself, as is the actual process that we undergo during the initiation. And I talk about this because we have this beautiful T-square, right? Mars, who's the ruler of Aries, squaring Chiron in Aries. Mars is in Cancer, so he's also making a square to the sun in Libra. And there is something so potent about being catalyzed through our own emotional body. To recognize that each of the challenges that we have faced or continue to face in our lives, in our relationships, in our inner world, if it doesn't serve to make us a more loving person, then we've missed the point. And if we've missed the point, it's okay. It's kind of like reading a book or telling a joke and not really getting it. You know, most of us, from the perspective of these core initiations, at least when they come to relationships, I think, get this opportunity multiple times. And the reason I'd say that is because, the soul comes with a very particular curriculum. And if we don't work it out through our family relationships, we'll, attract a relationship that matches some dynamic in the family and then have to work it out through that relationship. And often we'll spend the whole time thinking, well, that's because it's this relationship. So then we might end that relationship and go seeking another relationship, only to come to find that wherever you go, there you are. And the dynamics that we are being initiated in belong to us, right? They come with us, they stay with us until they're resolved. And I know that it's a thing of the skip step, which is when a planet squares the nodal axis, that the soul is coming in with a very specific imprint to resolve a dynamic, a specific desire from a soul perspective. But we could say that the underlying energy of the skip step is activated really anytime we have a T-square, which is a planet in a square to two planets, two opposing planets. The archetypal energy of those planets is active. And that happens for much of this week with Mars. Mars has already moved beyond the square to Chiron, but will stay in a pretty close square to the sun the rest of the week. And we would call Chiron in Aries, if we were applying the same phenomenon as the skip step. I'm going to take this a little far and just stay with me. Because Mars is the ruler of that Chiron. And also because this week is progressively about getting to this Aries full moon. We would say that Chiron is the ruler of this resolution. That the resolution itself, while we might want relationships to change, and certainly to whatever extent we want our committed relationships to change, maybe we're ending a commitment, maybe we're beginning, to feel the desire for a deeper commitment. But wherever we've been disempowered around those relationships, wherever the pattern of disempowerment in relationship, oh, they didn't see me, oh, they didn't love me, oh, they don't understand me, oh, they betrayed me, oh, they're gonna hurt me, oh, they don't trust me, oh, I can't trust them, right? Wherever that's the core story, the resolution actually is coming through the ability to feel how that wound belongs to us. How that particular story requires our courage to feel emotionally, what will it take for me to get to compassion? What will it take for me to get to empathy? What will it take for me to get to forgiveness? And I don't just think forgiveness is like, oh, I forgive them. It's okay. They did what they did. No, that's not what forgiveness is. My definition is that um, forgiveness is to give as before, meaning forgiveness is to return our relationship to what we're relating to in our life as best we can, as to the condition it was before we were ever hurt. And that may take a long time. It can be a very intensive process to really be able to say, like, oh, yeah, I don't feel impacted anymore by the hurt that happened with this person, or by, if it's our own hurt, if it's hurt that we caused, right? Where I can feel truly in my soul, I'm no longer inflicted by the guilt of having made a decision that hurt someone, or having done something or reacted in a way that was harmful to others. And yet, that really is the goal of forgiveness, because it's about restoration of our ability to feel connection, love, maybe even unconditional love and acceptance as being that kind of bottom line. And you know, from the perspective of the chart as it is right now, that's a big part of this activation. We're going to keep carrying those wounds into relationship and recreating the pattern of relating where we get hurt or we hurt others. And we don't actually get to experience ourselves as more loving or to receive more love until those dynamics are resolved. And I would say if anything is coming through this Aries, moon week, it is the illumination of what is necessary to claim within ourselves in order to find that resolution and take it with us somewhere new. Right? It's so beautiful to see when people do find that resolution within themselves and they take it into a new relationship where they're able to get their needs met, where they're able to experience deeper love and intimacy. It's so beautiful to see when people resolve those dynamics and they're able to step into leadership and service in their lives, doing work that they truly, deeply feel called to. It's so beautiful to see when people have resolved those things in themselves, and when in the face of family members whose judgment or fear or anger is pointed towards them, they're able to stand in the truth of who they are and still have loving connection. It's so beautiful to see when it resolves through us and we're able to have greater compassion for the world and be more free of guilt and fear, even if just a little bit, right? We're not giants in this, right? We're human beings. We are creatures of habit. For the most part, we move very slowly through our evolutionary process. And when we get to the moon, tomorrow we have a moon opposite Vesta in Virgo. I think the healing journey that we're all on relative to this, look at this grand trine that's been pretty much, we've had Venus and Mars in a trine. We have the Pisces moon, you know, it really speaks to me of the support of our emotional body to help guide us through the initiation itself, right? And the emotional body has to grieve. It has to feel what it feels. Even if what it feels is tied to hurt and harm from the past, it can't be bypassed, right? It has to be felt all the way through. And in this last week, I've had, layers of grief come up, a resurgence of a story that's been deeply painful for me for the last several years. Yeah, I can't even really talk about it without the emotion coming up to the surface. And yet I recognize that it would not be here if its resolution weren't called for in my life. And full moons, while this full moon isn't necessarily, it isn't an eclipse technically because the sun and the moon will both be greater than 11 degrees from the nodes. It has that effect of an eclipse with Mars in the center, squaring Chiron, squaring the sun. Let's just get it closer here to the actual full moon itself. Um, it has that quality of heightened completion, accelerated growth. Here's the moon coming around to square Mars. This is a last quarter square. Um, then we have the full moon, which perfects on Thursday. And, Aries moon is powerful. It's powerful energy. It's Martian energy. It's our will, right? But there's very little that our willpower can actually sustain. We can easily develop ways of driving ourselves into the ground, in a way. It's like too much will, too much, you know, energy in that kind can lead to exhaustion, to burnout. And likewise, too much passivity, too much focus on pleasing others, too much water, too much emotion can make it very hard for us to initiate. And maybe on some level we do need to initiate change, right? On some level we do need to accept that um the end has come for some things, right? All things ripen in their own time, right? All things come to a culmination. The human life is no different, right? We have the cycles of birth and death. We go through the cycles of the seasons, from spring to fall to winter. All of these are hard woven into the nature of our human experience because they signify something for us. They tell us emotionally, psychologically, even the moon cycles, right? I love in the Jewish calendar, so many of the holy days are tied to the lunar cycle. It's a lunar new year, right? Everything begins with the new moon. Each period of month in the Jewish calendar is tied to a new moon. And when we get to a full moon, we know that we're halfway through, right? It's not the end of the lunar cycle. The end of the lunar cycle is the balsamic phase, right? When it comes all the way around to total darkness before we begin again. It's actually the peak of the lunar cycle. We could call this the climax point, where something that was seeded in that Libra eclipse, the final eclipse of the year, something potentially that was seeded in that April new moon that we had back, that was the first Aries eclipse of the year, is coming all the way right to show us and share with us what is the next right action, right? Maybe we have been working on these things within ourselves. Maybe we have really developed in a lot of ways, capacities that we didn't have at the beginning of this year. I know for myself, I can see ways in which I have softened. I can see ways in which I have grown. But I am certainly not where I want to be in all things. And there is so much still unresolved, right? But a part of what we've been doing this whole year with these Aries Libra nodes is working out the self and the other, working out the emotional body and the structures of our lives to the extent to which, right, in less than a month's time from this week forward, we will complete the final cycle of Pluto and Capricorn. We will complete by the end of this year, early next year, the final cycle of these Aries Libra nodes where they won't come back again for another 18 years. So we have to recognize that this illumination that we receive this week is really about the initiation that has been underway for us for quite some time. One that I do think is bringing us towards deeper and more meaningful relationships. One that I do think is resolving us into a place of commitment where the I and the we are being met simultaneously within the emotional body that says, this is for my own healing. There is nothing that happens to me. There is everything that is happening for my growth, for my own healing. And yet that healing is only working as a bottom line if it is softening me, if it is bringing more love into my life, if it is creating a way in which I can access greater vulnerability, right? Venus has been in her underworld this whole time in the sign of Scorpio. That's what I call, her Scorpio time, her time in the underworld. And she makes her progress as well in this week, changing signs, entering the sign of Sagittarius, right? In a way, she is going forward with things. She's traveling before the sun, right? So eventually her cycles oscillate between being a morning star emerging before the sun and being an evening star emerging after the sun, right? And they depend, on where she is relative to her retrograde. And her morning star phase, right, where she's rising, there are parts of the transition from evening star to morning star which are invisible, where that just her position close to the sun and her timing of rising or not, not allowing her to be seen. In a way, we can often go through these kind of internal experiences where something that we're working out around our self-love and self-value, something that we're working around the deeper meaning and purpose of our work in the world can't be seen just yet. But it doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? Just because things are invisible, there's a whole period of time, when a baby is conceived that it's completely invisible, can't be seen to the naked eye, But very quickly, something starts to create a heartbeat, right? Something starts to emerge, and then eventually, when a woman gets to a certain point in their pregnancy, it can't not be seen, right? It's so imminent. The change, the birth, the creation is so imminent that it can't not be seen. It may be obvious to everyone around us that we're ready for something. And maybe even inside, we're ready for something and we know something has to change. We know something in the way that we've been dealing with our resources, in the way that we've been doing our work, managing our money, in the way that we've been living in our home. We know something has to change. It's so imminent, it's so pressing on our soul that we can't deny it, and yet it hasn't been born yet. And that's a part of the energy to work with relative to this week, because I think, especially after the full moon, we might feel very strong desire to ground ourselves, right? To make real into the earth something that is um, going to serve the next chapter of our lives. And yet at the same time, we might not have the right pieces of information, or we might not have found the right thing. You know, it's sort of like knowing that you have to move, knowing you have to move. You that have this real pressure internally. So you're trying to prepare, right? In a way, you're looking for somewhere to live and you're trying really hard to find that place, trying to imagine what it'll be like. But like until you find that place, until you have a signed, purchase agreement or a lease agreement, and you're ready to like pack the boxes and you get the truck and you actually do the thing, right? There isn't really anything for you to do. It's hard. It's a kind of a caught place because you might otherwise feel to be initiating something. Maybe you do start by purging some of the things in your house or selling things or preparing things, but it's usually in those last moments when people are moving out where the big energy moves, right? Where they get rid of all the stuff, where they pack up all the boxes. And the full moon, especially leading up to it and just post it, can have that kind of dynamic tension, right? And then we move through this week where we have a moon, full moon in Aries, then a moon Uranus. So there is something being catalyzed through the weekend that is meant to liberate us, really, from those stuck patterns, meant to help shake up the parts of our lives that have been undergoing this initiation for some time, but can't really survive without a change of thinking. That the relationship won't make it to the next level if we don't expose our vulnerability, if we don't share our truth, if we don't feel our feelings, if we're not honest, right? We can't move to the next home if we're not willing to let go of what is, willing to look for something different, willing to take the risk that this is the right place to be or to not be, right? Making decisions can be hard to do in these particular times, especially to the extent that they're emotionally charged and or connected to losses, connected to belief systems as well, right? And belief systems that have really undergone, I think, quite an initiation in and of themselves. There's something that just gets stirred up inside of us when we don't really know what to think about our lives when we've gone through such a powerful change, or um you know there's a period of time where our thinking and our beliefs have to go through a real reevaluation of what's most important to us. And I do think that this time of Venus and Sagittarius will help us connect to that, because the the truth and freedom that Venus and Sagittarius desires, the real authenticity of what is it like to to be free in my heart, to be free in my mind, regardless of my circumstances. That's the thing. If love, if our peace, if our happiness, if our contentment is dependent on circumstances changing, it's very likely that those things will not give us what we want. We'll get the thing, or we'll get the new relationship, the pattern will reemerge, the disappointment, all the things, the trauma, the trigger, and maybe, maybe we'll get lucky and get somebody who's a little bit more capable of meeting us in the ways that we desire, but maybe not. Maybe not. Because to the extent to which we were looking for that thing to give us something that we weren't able to cultivate ourselves, it's more than likely that we wouldn't be able to receive it anyways, that we wouldn't be able to really take it in. And so the challenge here is, can we get closer to the love that we desire from inside our own truth, from inside our own honesty, from inside our own emotional experience, from inside our own thinking? Can we work things from an inside out perspective while there's so much conflict in the world, while there's so much challenge, while there's so much crisis happening all around us? What do we need to do in order to feel anchored, just to have our feet on the ground, right? Just to have a sense of like trust in the greater unfolding, in the wisdom that's being awakened inside of us as a part of this whole process. That becomes sort of our North Star, that inner guidance system, that listening, that we're able to kind of shed all the other things that we think we need in order to meet ourselves. And sometimes those things get taken away, and so that makes it easier because we didn't have to give them up, we just lost them. But other times, it's not necessarily the way that it works. So, big week ahead. We get through all the way through the Gemini moon. The moon will square Saturn, the moon will square Neptune after its conjunction to Jupiter. I think there's some reconciliation of our minds after sort of a big clearing. Sort of like, I can only imagine what's happening for people in parts of the United States that have been affected by the hurricane. There's all this preparation for the storm, and you never know how it's going to impact. And then the storm takes its toll on the land, and then there's like a drying out period where you're having to actually sort through the muck and the mud and figure out what's safe and what's not safe, what's valuable and what's not valuable, what can be salvaged and what has to go. And, God, I send so much love and blessings to people who are encountering that in their lives in whatever shape or form, right? Whether through natural disaster or through personal experience of another kind. We all need, at the end of the day, to have that hope and optimism that even our darkest hours are leading us into something bright, into something that we couldn't have. This is the evolutionary necessity, right? We could not have created it by having those perfect conditions. It would not, the evolution that was necessary for our soul would not have been initiated in that way. So however unfortunate it is, the loss, the grief, the hurt, the betrayal, right? I continue to try to reflect on the periods of time in my life where, oh my God, those were so hard moments, being betrayed in that way, losing everything. It hurt so bad, but the life that I have today would not have been possible without it. And so whatever I'm going through today that continues to reflect unresolved dynamics, whatever life is coming is not possible without this resolution, without this getting worked out within my emotional body, without facing the courage to feel what is uncomfortable and find my truth within it. So, my friends, I hope that you have a beautiful and a blessed full moon week. My prayer for you is that whatever is happening for you, that it is increasing your access to more love in your life. May it be so, and may you be well. And bye for now.